going to start with a poem. My mother talks in my father's sleep. As a kid at night, I'd hear them through the walls, nagging and snoring, nagging and snoring. I could never figure out if it was just that she always started talking when he laid down to sleep, or if he chose to start sleeping whenever she started talking. I'd listen to them the way you listen to mice chewing in the walls. The sound of Dad's snores, the bass rhythm, my mom white-noising out a steady snare, their anti-lullabies became the soundtrack to my childhood lack of sleep. Days my mother would clip her words out, sharpening the tips so they would sting. My father's calloused mind, oblivious to the way he trailed dirty dishes and laundry and broken appliances behind him like a leaky garbage trolley. Oh, and facts. My father would tell her about the unique mating habits of the South American tsetse fly. Gems of science shared and dripping down on her like Chinese water torture. Slowly freezing to her, heavy and cold. These collections of everything she didn't like about him, dripping down to form icicles she would sharpen for the next attack. Our family went to so much therapy, but for all the words that filled our house with the loud blizzard wail of endurance, neither of them stirred or woke. One day, after a particularly rousing chorus of "Come, come, whoever you are," a congregant said to me, "What do you suppose it means, lover of leaving?" I'd been singing it for decades, but I hadn't given it a moment's thought, so I texted Lynn Unger, who is the author of the song, and who explained to me that the words weren't hers, and that the original poem had been through some somewhat sketchy translation before she got to it. Okay, then, I wanted to know what she supposed that they meant. Lynn, who is quite an accomplished poet herself, said, "It's a poem, Liz." Poems mean whatever their readers think that they mean. So what do we think it means, then? In my current life, I do a lot of leaving. I live nomadically for half the year, traveling in a van, which I built into a little RV, and preaching in UU communities. And when people ask about this, I tell them I'm doing it to see the world, which is true, but there's something more than that to it. I'm in a phase of my life where there's something life-affirming to me about leaving. It feels kind of spiritual practice-y, like I'm sending a message to myself. I was raised to think of hanging in there as a moral good in and of itself. It starts in school. Stay in school, kids. Every classroom in my childhood had a poster that said something like, "When you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on." There was one, do you remember? Yeah. Do you remember the miserable one of like that wet, unhappy-looking kitten? Yes. Hanging desperately to the clothesline? It says hang in there. It's supposed to be like a message about perseverance, but I just kept thinking about the jerk who put the kitten in that position to get the photo. Did you ever wish there was like a caption that said, "When people put you in uncomfortable situations in order to serve their own ends, you should get the hell out of there as quickly as you can"? At home, there was a similar message. I watched my parents derive great pride from the continued existence of their somewhat miserable marriage. When my friend Susan's parents got a divorce, my mother went on and on about how she would never do that to us girls. Susan, she said, was now going to come from a broken family. Susan used that word too. She said broken. She sobbed and she told me about how everything was ending and that it was all her fault, and she listed all the ways she could have been a better kid. And I hugged her and I told her it would be okay. And when we were done talking, I wrote down a detailed list of all the things she said she did that were bad. And over the Christmas break, I did every single thing on that list. Which is how I can tell you, as I told Susan when I got back, that she did not cause her parents' divorce. She was a big boasting boaster. None of that worked. I got grounded and my parents stayed married. They stayed tightly glued to each other, like ice statues in the cold that can't change shape without shattering. As I got older, I began exploring church, where staying is also the right choice. First, I became Christian, where staying is like the ultimate moral good, losing the faith is the ultimate failure. After I lost said faith, I joined the UU Church, and I found even there were fixed categories of member and non-member, and you wanted more of this one. It was so different from my experiences at Sanctuary, where it's okay if you drift in and out as your life evolves, and there isn't really a member category at all, much less member and failed member like I was used to. As a young adult, one of my roles in my home church in Saskatoon was newcomer welcomer. I did a lot of orientations of new members, and I saw it as part of my job to lay the groundwork for them to stay. I'd talk to them about the need to build relationships because studies show people who make at least 3 friends in the first 6 months are far more likely to stay. Now that seems so backwards to me. The relationships don't exist to serve the continued existence of the church. The church exists to serve the relationships. Over time, in my capacity as newcomer welcomer, I was having this conversation with a woman that we'll call Sarah. Sarah's story is one I'd seen before. She was raised in a very fundamentalist Christian household. She believed deeply in the power of religious community, but she'd been unable to reconcile her theology with that of her church. She was shunned for asking the wrong questions. At the time she found us, she was unpacking what she'd learned about God and sexuality and shame and all that. And she was delighted, she told me, to have finally found a place of acceptance and caring that was everything her home church had claimed to be. This place, she told me, was different. And she was right. We are pretty different. Her beliefs and questions would be welcome in our congregation, but also congregations are filled with people doing annoying people stuff, and that was going to all be the same. And so I considered it my job as newcomer welcomer to set her up and prepare her for that reality. I told her people join and they get excited about the things we don't teach, and they do go on a healing journey, but if that's all they do, if they don't put down roots, they find that they drift away. And then I stopped talking because Sarah was crying. She was like big sobbing crying. Liz, she said, the way you just described all that stuff being healed just like that, like it's nothing, I can't imagine living without this pain. She was seeing what I couldn't, how incredibly valuable it is to heal people, whether or not they stay for the long term. To Sarah, I must have looked like someone standing at the door of a hospital complaining that after we stitch up people's wounds, most of them just leave. It's great to be a hospital. It's okay for journeys to end. It's okay to have ebb and flow, whether those things be communities or jobs or relationships. As an adult, when I noticed the cold creeping into my own marriage, I pretended not to see it. Having learned nothing, apparently, from watching my parents, I was sure that determination would carry us through. For years, we hunted for the right words, filling our home with good talks, that swirled around us like drifts of snow. I tried to avoid speaking the wrong words, the ending words, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living my life with my tongue stuck to cold metal. When I called my parents to tell them about the separation, my mother asked, "How are the children? What about the children? Are the children okay?" And these felt more like statements than like questions. And I was terrified, and I answered different every time, with every answer feeling sore and tender as a fresh burn. Some days I could imagine nothing worse than Susaning my own kids, remembering her on the playground. Some days we were desperate with the pain of it, and I kept thinking about what happens when you tear a tongue free from metal, and it felt like everything was being splattered. On other days, though, we were thriving. My son told me he felt like he finally had his parents back. We were no longer off on walks all the time or coming back to stare fixed at our screens like deer in headlights. We were becoming alive to our kids again, to everything again. Everything felt warmer. Nothing looks clean when the snow is melting. Every step makes a mess. At first we thawed with the blazing pain of a frostbitten limb, and then we thawed like spring. Splatters and dirty, but alive and warm with rain. The good parts came slowly, like warm water poured over a stuck tongue, until it relaxes loose. When I told my brother-in-law about the separation, he said, "I have just the thing," and ran into the next room and brought back a picture book, which was the egg story I just told you about hatching. Susan's family was never broken. That's not what the cracks meant. Susan's family was hatching. And over the coming years, mine would too. After a while, when my mother would ask, "How are the children? What about the children? Are the children okay?" I dodged the question for a whole new reason. I didn't want to tell her the truth, which would just hurt her. The truth of these years later is that we're all blooming, like everything does in spring, messy and unfolding and beautiful. The truth is, we're all okay. We got everybody out in time. Sometimes, hanging in there is the right choice that gets you through the hard stuff to the place you need to be. If you are in a hard time in your life and you need to hang in there, I am rooting for you. I wish you all the strength and endurance in the world. Some of the best things in life come from perseverance. But the idea that hanging in there is the default moral position, that's a lie. If you are in a situation or relationship in your life that it's time to walk away from, I'm rooting for you in that too. If you are finding a pattern too toxic and you need to protect yourself and go, I'm sending you strength for that journey. Or even if it's less dire than that, something or someone that isn't a good fit, that's just run its course. I celebrate your choice in that too. For me, some of the best transformations in my life have come from walking away. It's always hard to know which path to take, of course, but in my experience, the hardest part is right before the first step. Wherever you are on your journey, your messiness is welcome here. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. These are words of Lynn Unger, and they mean what you think they mean. There isn't a right answer, there just isn't. Every choice will wound someone, heal someone, build a wall, and open a conversation. Things will always happen that you can't foresee, but you have to choose. It's all we have, the little rudder in the midst of all the eddies and the rapids, the current that pulls us to the sea. The fact you're swept along by the river is no excuse. Watch where you're going. Lean in towards what you love. And when in doubt, tell the truth.